afternoon and welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. As India continues her fight against COVID-19, in the next 1 hour, we'll get you the exact situation on the ground across the country as far as new cases and vaccination is concerned. Now, a while back, Delhi's Chief Minister announced a weekend curfew in the national capital, and of course, a couple of other restrictions have been put in place. We'll also talk about what a latest US intelligence report says about India's ties with Pakistan and China, as well as its take on Afghanistan and North Korea. Now, apart from this, updates from business and sports, but first, let's get to you the headlines at this hour. Daily increase in COVID-19 cases in the country surpasses the 2 lakh mark for the first time. Over 11.4 crore vaccine doses administered so far. PM Modi underlines commitment to ensure adequate availability of vaccines. Delhi, Karnataka witnessed record spike in new COVID-19 situation. Rajasthan imposes night curfew across the state from the 16th of April. Maharashtra remains the worst hit. West Bengal Chief Electoral Officer calls for a meeting with recognized political parties to discuss campaigning precautions during COVID-19. The meet is scheduled for tomorrow. Indian Air Force Commanders Conference starts today. The 3-day conference is aimed at addressing the issues of the Air Force's operational capabilities and to give IAF a significant edge over its adversaries. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani speaks with President Biden over the US decision to withdraw troops by September 11th. Says Afghan forces capable of defending its people. President Biden says US will reorganize counter-terrorism capabilities and substantial assets in the region to prevent re-emergence of terrorist threat. In more international news, resolution condemning the Uyghur genocide by the People's Republic of China introduced in the US House Foreign Affairs Committee. The resolution calls on President Biden to refer atrocities for UN investigation, seek sanctions and take all possible actions to end the genocide. And in sports, Real Madrid and Manchester City proceed to UEFA Champions League semis after ousting Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund on aggregate. Real will face Chelsea and Man City will fight Paris Saint-Germain for a spot in the finals. All right, let's first move to our developing story. Well, India has reported the highest number of COVID-19 cases in a single day. A total of 2,739 new samples have tested positive in the past 24 hours. As per the Health Ministry, 93,528 recoveries were recorded in the last 24 hours, taking the cumulative total of recovered patients to 1,24,29,564. With this, the recovery rate currently stands at 88.92%. India's total active caseload stands at over 14.71 lakh today. The country's present active caseload consists of 9.84% of the total positive cases. The fatality rate, meanwhile, stands at 1.24%. Well, Delhi recorded an alarming number of COVID cases yesterday. A total of over 17,200 samples were tested positive in the past 24 hours. Amid rising COVID-19 infections, the Delhi government has added hotels and banquet halls along with 23 private hospitals to increase the number of beds for needy COVID patients. Now, in a recent press conference, which was a short while ago, Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has announced several measures, including imposition of a weekend curfew, closure of malls, gyms, spas and auditoriums. And cinema halls will operate at 30% capacity only, that is to deal with the rising COVID cases.
वीकेंड के ऊपर कर्फ्यू दिल्ली के अंदर लगाया जाएगा। इसका कारण ये है कि लगभग हफ्ते के दौरान, वर्किंग डेज़ के दौरान आदमी को अपनी कमाई करने के लिए जाना होता है, आदमी को अपने काम पे जाना होता है। लेकिन वीकेंड में अक्सर जो लोग निकलते हैं वो अपने एंटरटेनमेंट के लिए या दूसरी एक्टिविटीज़ के लिए निकलते हैं जो कि कर्टेल की जा सकती है। इसीलिए चेन तोड़ने के लिए वीकेंड के ऊपर, ताकि लोग ज़्यादा संपर्क में ना आए, वीकेंड के ऊपर कर्फ्यू लगाया जा रहा है। लेकिन
All right, I'm joined by my colleague Tapush Bhattacharya, who has been tracking the COVID status in the national capital for us. Good afternoon, Tapush. An important announcement there by the Tele Chief Minister of a weekend curfew there. One thing that I want to understand is that what is the reasoning behind it? Like he said that usually people go out on weekends for entertainment and not really for work. And especially in this way, we are seeing it's not the elderly more, it is the young adults, the teenagers, the children who are getting affected more by the coronavirus. So really an important announcement there in Delhi?
Important announcement, but is it a little late? That is something that
Yes.
A lot of people will be asking him, because remember from on 8th of this month, when the first time the number breached the 7,000 mark, the clamoring calls were started at that time that whether Delhi should actually start imposing more serious measures, considering the fact that the alarming manner in which the number were rising earlier before the start of the month. It was still under control, but once this month started, the numbers were started to double up after almost every day at the start of the month. And that's something that a lot of people were talking about, that more strict measures should have been put in place, especially in the marketplaces and other places where the COVID protocol or COVID behavior were severely restricted, and people were actually going around in their work without following the protocol as well as wearing the mask. So those were some of the points that a lot of people were asking. One would say that it is a welcome step, but it's a step which probably has come probably a week late. They should have started with the strictness earlier, but as I said, it's a thing that they have started. The night curfew that they've spoken about, the weekend curfew that they are now talking about, finally will be helpful in probably giving a break in the number, in the manner in which the number has swelled up. As I spoke on March of 8th of this month, the number was somewhere in the region of 7,000, and yesterday in the Delhi Health Bulletin, it peaked around 17,282, which is the highest number that you have since the pandemic started last year. So from then onwards, the worrying factor, Shreya, is the number of deaths. So continuously in the last 3 days, we have seen over 80 deaths reported. In fact, yesterday it breached the 100 death, in fact highest so far in the last year or so. If you take a comparative study, you will see that there are more than 100. This is the highest number of deaths that happened, and also the positivity rate, Shreya, that also climbed up to almost 16%, which is again highest so far. So in many ways, this is something that the state government should have been a little careful about, and should have taken cognizance quite early and taken a premeditated step, but that didn't happen. As of now, the few of the main important steps that the Delhi government has taken is about the essential services. That's going to continue, but for that they have to also some of them have to take special passes, the curfew passes also they have to take. Interestingly, the malls, the gyms, the spas, the auditorium, they are absolutely closed down. So that's a good part that they have decided to close down them. The restaurants, they have made it a point that there will be no dine-in facility that will be available. Only takeaway facilities will be available, and also the cinema halls that will be. They have restricted the number of cinema halls, seating capacity to almost 30%. Even then, I believe that it is something that they need to revisit, considering the fact that if one comes into close contact with any of the positive person, maybe an asymptomatic cases, then it can have a massive repercussion. So as the Chief Minister spoke, that these are measures for now. The night curfew has the weekend curfew has kicked in, keeping in mind the fact that if that doesn't break the chain, they may take some more drastic measures in times to come. Shreya.
Right. Tapash, quickly before we let you go, did the Chief Minister mention till when this weekend curfew will, be, or when will it end? When will these restrictions end? Did he mention any sort of date?
No, as of now, the weekend curfew will be till Sunday till Monday morning, 6 a.m. It will continue. Basically, the way the night curfew till now that's going on, till 6 a.m. that will continue. But one will feel that as of now, the information that we are getting from our sources is that from Friday 10 p.m. onwards, the night curfew, the weekend curfew will kick in. It can also come a little earlier. The sources are saying that it may also happen after 6 p.m. So we're still getting, we still haven't got the absolutely clear idea. But it is as of now, we have been told that 10 p.m. onwards, from Friday 10 p.m. onwards, the weekend curfew will kick in, and it will, it will be over by Monday 6 a.m. So as of now, that's the time period that we have been told by our sources.
All right, a desperately needed step there in the national capital with cases surging. Tapash Bhattacharya, thanks very much for joining us with all those inputs. Well, meanwhile, in Maharashtra, the state continues to face rising COVID cases with over 58,900 people getting infected and 278 losing their lives in the past 24 hours. Communication has been suspended across Maharashtra from 8 p.m. yesterday for 15 days. Several restrictions have been imposed during the communication bandh, which will continue till 7 a.m. on the 1st of May. And my colleague Shishir is joining us from Mumbai with more on this. Shishir, good afternoon. As we've all seen, Maharashtra, Mumbai, it continues to remain one of the worst hit states, worst impacted states. What is the latest ground situation there today? What is the status of the corona figures there today?
Well, absolutely, Shreya. As we're looking at this number here, the numbers speak itself. Nearly 58,000 cases were registered yesterday in entire Maharashtra, and this is the highest number that we have seen here. Since last couple of weeks, we have seen here that numbers increasing day by day here. It's almost crossing 50,000 mark every day, and that's quite a worrisome factor for the state government here. At the same time, state government yesterday had announced a complete lockdown from 8 p.m. yesterday till 7 a.m. of the 1st of the May here. So for the 15 days, there will be a strict lockdown probably in Mumbai. State government has not termed it as a strict lockdown. They have said that the rules have been stringent here, but at the same time it says that it is known as a break the chain. Because the numbers are increasing, and that's the reason to reduce the number. We have to break this corona chain here, and that's why this strict lockdown probably will help going forward. As far as the supplies of important essential items are concerned, the state government said that except essential services, all other services will remain closed for the next 15 days in Maharashtra. The private offices have been told to shift to work from home. Even in the government offices also, only 50% workforce the government have allowed them to work in government offices. Apart from that, the people who want to travel to long distance or out of state, they can travel via trains here, but even train officials have been told to follow the COVID rules by the state government. Well, the interstate traveling has also been permitted, but only with valid reasons here, and especially those who have been allowed with essential passes and essential services have also been allowed to travel. So far, there's no pass system has been given to the Maharashtra government. The state and the officials have said that people who want to travel with the valid reasons are allowed to travel, and those on essential duty can travel and they can use the public transport. So obviously various measures, various steps have been taken under the break the chain initiative by the state government here. But it is not just the the stringent rules that probably we're talking about. At the same time, Maharashtra government has given some exemption to the people, and especially the poor people and those who have been working on the roadside, also the eateries or the pawn shop also, or maybe auto rickshaw driver. So these people have also been taken into consideration. The state government will give them some amount. That's what has been announced by the Chief Minister. So if you look at the entire overall package that the state government is going to give to the state is almost around 5,000 crore rupees. It's what the state has claimed through various schemes of the state government along with the central government here. So obviously, yes, today is being the first day of the lockdown here. We have seen quite a mixed reaction from the people here. At some of the places, we have seen the roads were deserted completely. But at some places we have seen people still found on the roads here. The markets have been still crowded here. For example, Pune, the latest news that we've got in the morning, people have gathered at the Pune market, Pune APMC market here. So these are the situations seen at some of the places, but most of the places we have seen that it's been implemented quite rigorously by the state authority also and by the police also. As far as the police officials are concerned, yesterday Maharashtra DGP have made it very clear that they will implement the rules given by this, by the state government quite strictly. He said that extra police force have also been deployed at various places wherever it's required. The CRPF teams have also been deployed, for this work here. So obviously, even from the authority perspective, also the state, the collectorate, all the police personnel have already upped their sleeves and started working to make this, the lockdown as a success here. Well, at this point in time, the state government is basically eyeing to reduce this number. And this 15 days lockdown probably is what the government trying to do, is to reduce the number, but at the same time to provide or facilitate the important infrastructure, medical facilities to the patients in the state. Because if you are looking at the numbers, which is 50,000 every day, it will become quite difficult for the state government after a few days to provide the oxygen or the remdesivir or even the ventilators, and that's the reason this number need to be reduced. And this strict actions taken by the government think that they may probably get control over these numbers.
Absolutely, Shishir, and of course, one of the moot points coming out from there is that the government and authorities can really do so much, because at the end of the day, the responsibility lies on us, the citizens. And like you said, markets still crowded, people still coming out. That is one of, the things that we all have to take care of, follow guidelines and just do what the authorities and experts are asking us to do. Shishir, thanks very much for joining us from Maharashtra and getting us all those inputs from the state. All right, let's get you the testing updates. As per the Indian Council of Medical Research now, over 26.2 crore samples have been tested for COVID-19 in the country so far, including over 13.84 lakh samples which were tested yesterday. And day 4 of the countrywide Tika Utsav saw the total vaccinations cross the 11.44 crore mark, with over 33.13 lakh vaccine doses administered yesterday. Now, the cumulative number of COVID-19 vaccine doses administered in the country now stands at 11 crore 44 lakh 93,238. 3 states have been administered over 1 crore vaccinations, including over 1.11 crore in Maharashtra, over 1.2 in Rajasthan and around a crore in Uttar Pradesh. And in order to deal with the rising COVID cases, Goa has extended the Tika Utsav up to 30th of April. Chief Minister Pramod Sawant has appealed to all eligible people to come forward and get their vaccination done. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with governors of all states regarding the COVID-19 situation and the ongoing vaccination drive in the country through video conferencing. The Prime Minister said that in the battle against COVID, along with the vaccines, our values and sense of duty are our biggest strengths. He said the role of the governors through appropriate utilization of their social capacity thus becomes all the more critical to achieving this. Discussing the increased RT-PCR testing capacity, the Prime Minister noted that the country has become Atmanirbhar with respect to kits and other material that is related to testing. Now, all this has led to a reduction in the cost of RT-PCR tests also. The Prime Minister highlighted that India has become the fastest nation to reach the landmark of 10 crore vaccinations. And noting the positive impact of Tika Utsav in the last 4 days, the Prime Minister said that in this period, the vaccination drive was expanded and new vaccination centers have also come up. Now, with rising cases, the Rajasthan government has decided to impose a curfew from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. from tomorrow. While all government offices will be shut from 4 p.m., shops, commercial establishments will have to be shut after 5 p.m. The government has also decided to postpone board exams for classes 10th and 12th, which fall under the purview of the Rajasthan Board of Secondary Education. And after that, let's get to the big news that we are tracking today. All right, in an important report, the US intelligence community has said that although a general war between India and Pakistan is unlikely, crisis between the two is likely to become more intense, risking an escalatory cycle. Now, the report, which was published by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, has further added that under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India is more likely than in the past to respond with military force to Pakistani provocations, and heightened tensions raise the risk of conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. Further on India-China, the report mentions that China-India border tensions remain high despite some forced pullbacks this year. China's occupation since May 2020 of contested border areas is the most serious escalation in decades and has led to the first lethal border clash between the two countries since 1975. And to discuss more about the report and its significance, I'm joined with our guest, Mr. Alok Bansal, who's the director at the India Foundation. Mr. Bansal, thanks very much for joining us on DD India this afternoon. I've got some excerpts with me from the US Intel report, and I'd like to start with what it has said on India and Pakistan. It says that a general war between India and Pakistan is unlikely, but under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India is more likely than in the past to respond with military force to Pakistani provocations. Your thoughts on it first?
See, what they are saying is well known, that India in last few years has been very, very muscular, and
yes,
any provocation from Pakistan, we have given a befitting reply. At the same time, we have reached out to Pakistan. We want friendly relations. We have left the onus of creating an environment for friendly relations on Pakistan. Regrettably, Pakistan has its own internal dynamics which prevents it from actually improving relations. And we saw it very recently when trade with India came up for discussion in Pakistan, and Pakistan's government, the ministries actually recommended that it was in their economic interest, it was in the interest of their population that imports from India should be allowed, but they were not allowed. Similarly, we are seeing what's happening in Punjab, Pakistani Punjab, for last 2 days, where the paramilitary forces have been called, over 200 policemen have been injured. So all these threats which emanate from extremist elements actually prevent Pakistan's government from taking any worthwhile step. Pakistan knows it very clearly that under the present dispensation, India will react. And we have shown it to them in Balakot and in other cases, that whenever there has been any provocation, India has given them a befitting reply. But at the same time, we have given them enough indications that we are desirous of good friendly relations between neighbors. But the onus of creating that environment lies on them, and I think Prime Minister Modi's letter to their president on Pakistan Day, etc., were very, very clear indications that India desires peace. But the environment for peace should be there. Pakistan should shun the path of terrorism, the path of compulsive hostility, and should start accepting India's that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter of India.
Right. Mr. Bansal, the United States has time and again called out Pakistan on the terrorism that is born out of that country. But with, President Biden's administration taking over, how do you think the United States will really deal with Pakistan vis-a-vis its relations with India and, of course, with Pakistan?
See, I have no doubts that irrespective of the government that comes to power in United States, and now we have the Biden administration, as far as India-US relations are concerned, they will converge. In fact, by and large, India and US have common values and our interests converge. But please remember, any country in the Committee of Nations has its own personal interests. And that's why there will be some occasional stresses that will be caused. And we saw that. Now, the US 7th Fleet's exercise of freedom of navigation in Lakshadweep Sea was, of course, contested by India because we felt that it infringed on our sovereignty. But by and large, in the global arena, India and the United States would converge, and that I think we are seeing a convergence. And I think Quad, the formation of Quad and convergence of interest between 4 democracies is, of course, a very, very significant posture. So as far as India is concerned, US would have better relations. But please understand, at this point of time, the current US administration, as well as the previous US administration, is very keen to extricate its troops from Afghanistan. Now, this particular requirement requires United States to some extent depend on Pakistan, because Pakistan, rightly or wrongly, does exercise certain influence. In fact, Taliban has been its own creation, and as a result, Pakistan's ISI wields enormous influence on Taliban, and so to that extent, we would see that US would probably engage. But on all other matters, I think US has made its preferences very clear. On climate change conference, Pakistan was not invited. And they have made it very clear that as far as South Asia is concerned, they accept India as their friend and accept India as the primary force in this particular region and as an emerging force to counter the increasing Chinese threat, which US perceives as creating a new world order, pushing for a global power, and trying to foster a new international norms, which they feel is going to be a long-term threat to the US interests.
Okay, Mr. Bansal, since you talked about the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, the report talks about that, and while it does talk about, the US placing faith on the Afghan government when it really comes to handling its own citizens and the state of affairs in its own country, it also says, quote unquote, that Afghan government will struggle to hold the Taliban at bay and Kabul continues to face setbacks on the battlefield. So really, I mean, how easy or tough is it going to be for the United States to really withdraw its troops and sort of reach that political and social stability that it hopes that this situation will bring in Afghanistan?
See, I have my views quite clear on this. I have never believed that a negotiated peace can be assured in Afghanistan by talking to Taliban. This is actually a mirage. This is actually a misconception. President Trump was in a great hurry to pull out of Afghanistan, and that's why they went for it. Taliban ideologically is not committed to peace. They will never be committed to peace. And if you see the events of last few months, they very clearly indicate that they are a terrorist organization which is committed to perpetrating violence against anyone who does not conform to their ideology. Now, with this sort of an organization, you cannot have a lasting peace. That is my view. And I feel Afghan government and its forces are capable of holding Taliban at bay, provided Afghan populace believes that this government is permanent. And now for that permanence, you need a token presence of the US troops or any international force on Afghan soil. Also, you need a financial commitment to the Afghan government because its salary bills at this point of time is huge, which Afghan revenues are not in a position to pay. So we need firstly a financial commitment and secondly a moral commitment whereby the populace feels that this government is going to stay and this government is staying. Please remember, if you go through the history of Afghanistan, the governments there have changed not because they were defeated on a battlefield, but because the key people crossed over. So Afghans have often been fence sitters. Now for these fence sitters to remain on the side of the government, it's important that they realize that this government is continuing.
Okay, Mr. Bansal, from Afghanistan, let's move to what the report says on China. And of course, its relations with India. It says, that the tensions will remain. But it also talks about China pushing for the reunification of Taiwan with it. And of course, the CCP trying to undercut the US influence and therefore expanding as a global power. How far do you think this is going to go, and how far do you think this holds, truth to it?
See, there is no doubt that China is committed to unification of Taiwan, and in fact, that's one of their biggest agenda. And China in the recent past has shown enough indications that any attempts by Taiwan to break free will be militarily contested. So that is one case. But as I said, China, US perceives as a global threat, because China is pushing for a global agenda, for a global order, which is contrary to what US requires. And that is why we will see that there is going to be confrontation, there is going to be increased tension between the United States and China in days to come. And it is in this context that US has been trying to usher in these democracies, the Quad and things like that. So that is what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to do.
All right, Mr. Bansal, on the topic of Myanmar, you know, the report says, actually doesn't say much. It just says that, you know, we condemn the violence that is going on and that there has been a break in the democratic transition in the country. And of course, there is a political and social instability. But should we have expected more from the United States on the case of Myanmar?
I think Myanmar is a case where US is committed to establishing democracy, but it is not in a position to intervene, doesn't want to intervene. So I think the statement that has come out is, I think, just about sufficient. It shows US concerns without committing it to anything as far as the state is concerned. So this is what the US policy has been. It is actually against the military takeover, and it has actually shown that very clearly that it doesn't want, doesn't support the military regime. But apart from sanctions against certain military personnel and the regime, it has not really taken any concrete steps to dislodge the military.
All right, Mr. Alok Bansal, thanks very much for joining us and helping us understand what really the latest US intelligence report means for India and, of course, for the rest of the world. Let's move on to our national prime segment now. All right, let's shift our focus to the West Bengal Assembly elections. The West Bengal Chief Electoral Officer has called for a meeting tomorrow with representatives of recognized national and state political parties to discuss campaigning precautions during COVID-19. Last Friday, the Election Commission had reminded political parties to follow COVID-19 protocols for campaigning after finding instances during the ongoing assembly elections where social distancing and mask-wearing norms were flouted. Now, in a letter to the political parties, the Election Commission reiterated its August 2020 guidelines for campaigning during the pandemic. It said that by violating COVID norms, the political parties and candidates are exposing themselves as well as the public attending such election meetings to the grave danger of infection. The poll panel also clarified that the Commission, in cases of breach, will not hesitate in banning public meetings and rallies of the defaulting candidates or campaigners or political parties without any further reference. And Rajiv Bhattacharya, my colleague, is joining us with more on this. He's been tracking the West Bengal elections for us. Rajiv, good afternoon. So the Election Commission really coming down firmly on political parties to follow COVID-19 guidelines and not flout those norms while campaigning during the pandemic.
Right, Shreya. Good afternoon. Yes, of course, the Commission is coming down strongly, as you said. And not only that, the Commission has called a meeting tomorrow with representatives of all political parties to discuss the situation. And very interestingly, the letter mentions that only one representative from every political party should come for the meeting, showing how serious the Commission is about the spreading pandemic. And of course, it's a major matter of concern for everyone, especially for the Commission, and also for the administration, for the police, and for the public at large, because when you have large meetings, there are people who are coming out and flouting the norms of COVID safety. And when you have star campaigners, people are eager to see them or hear them. Therefore, people are coming into close proximity with each other. And therefore, the pandemic is spreading. And let me just mention here also that one candidate, one Congress candidate who was contesting the elections, the elections were due to be held later this month, died this morning at a hospital in Kolkata. He was a contesting candidate. The election had to be countermanded there because of his death, and he was suffering from COVID. So that really goes to show how bad the situation really is. And not only the candidates, of course, candidates have to meet people, the campaigners and the public at large. Everyone is at great risk because of the spreading pandemic, and some measures need to be taken very urgently. Shreya.
Absolutely, Rajiv Bhattacharya, thanks very much for those inputs from West Bengal. So we'll have to see how that meeting pans out and what really comes out of it tomorrow when the Election Commission meets the political parties in West Bengal over COVID-19 guidelines and norms that are to be followed during the pandemic. All right, in other news, the first biannual Indian Air Force Commanders Conference for the year 2021 was inaugurated by Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh at the headquarters of the force. The conference of the apex level leadership is aimed at addressing the issues of the Air Force's operational capabilities in the times to come. A series of discussions would be conducted over a period of 3 days to address strategies and policies related to capabilities that would give the Air Force a significant edge over its adversaries. Various welfare and human resource measures to improve HR and administrative efficiency will also be discussed. The Air Force Commanders Conference, remember, is a biannual conference which provides a forum to the senior leadership of the Indian Air Force to discuss critical issues pertaining to operations, maintenance and administration. And our defense correspondent Nandita Dagar is joining us for more on this. Nandita, good afternoon. An important conference of the Indian Air Force there to discuss the operational capabilities and capacities of the Indian Air Force. What all is expected in this 3-day conference?
Yes, Shreya, good afternoon. What is happening is that in this conference, the Air Force will take stock of the year gone by and what is coming up. Okay. Just last month, we witnessed a batch of new Rafales which flew in from France. Yes. There is a new squadron to be formed in Hashimara in the northeast of the country. And of course, the threat to our northern borders in the form of China and its aggression and usurpation of territory continues on the LAC in eastern Ladakh. And we, of course, have our tried and tested adversary, which is our neighbor Pakistan, which is carrying out ceasefire violations, etc. Of course, for now there is a lull on the firing, but these are the things that will be discussed. Also, the threat perceptions across in the South Asian region, in the Greater Indo-Pacific, these will be the talks that will be held amongst the top commanders. The Defense Minister, as you rightly said, addressed the conference today. We expect the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and the Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat will also be addressing this commanders meeting. Another thing would be the network centricity and security of our cyber assets, because China has been known to carry out sabotage attacks. We just saw Israel carry that out this Sunday on an Iranian facility in Natanz. So this is something that is quickly gaining currency in the world these days. Conventional wars will be few and far between, but there will be greater asymmetric warfare, warfare by proxies, and that is something for which the Air Force is gearing up, and they will be mulling that. Also, the welfare of the air warriors, the airmen, the grassroots soldiers, their accommodation, their rehabilitation, because they retire very early, just like across all services they do, and their resettlement after retirement. These are the issues that will be the focus.
So important issues being emphasized at the 3-day Indian Air Force annual biannual Commanders Conference. Nandita Dagar, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs. Well, today is day 3 of the prestigious Raisina Dialogue, which is being held virtually this year. It's an action-packed day with various sessions involving nations and leaders to incubate debates and discussions, ideas and solutions on issues and topics that countries are engaging and grappling with in this pandemic year.
Millions affected by the massive data breach.
Fake news is in the top 3 items that every country that I want to speak to has on their agenda.
Even as we struggle to recover from the pandemic, we are grappling with an infodemic that may prove far more lethal for civilization as we know it.
We do not know enough about the actual impacts of what goes on under the hood of these massive social media companies.
Australian organisation.
All right, my colleague Abhishek Jha is joining us for more on this. Abhishek, good afternoon. We've seen in the last 2 days the Prime Minister, of course, addressed the inaugural session at the Raisina Dialogue, and of course we saw global leaders, taking part in important deliberations. But what is expected today? What is lined up at the Raisina Dialogue today?
So, Shreya, today the major event of today in Raisina Dialogue was the address of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and he has actually addressed the event. It was still underway a while ago. Well, he has highlighted the importance of Indo-Pacific and why this area is becoming geostrategically and for global economy a very important area. Also, why this area is has a potential to become the flashpoint in the future because of the aggressive approach of certain countries in this region. He has also highlighted that. Apart from mentioning that how traditionally India and Australia have been at a very good relationship and on several global issues, we have India and Australia have been on the same page, and hence he's also looking forward to a stronger tie with India and Australia in the days to come. Apart from all this, he has also tried to highlight the role of global other countries in this area and why every country should be looking forward to ensuring a peaceful, free, fair and transparent Indo-Pacific in this region.
All right, Abhishek, thanks very much for joining us with those updates from the Raisina Dialogue. Now, moving on, in a recent development, the Supreme Court has ordered further CBI investigation into the false espionage case against ISRO scientist Nambi Narayanan. The centre had requested the Supreme Court to accept the inquiry report submitted by Justice D.K. Jain committee, which had suggested suitable action against erring police officials. Now, it is to be noted that the Supreme Court had constituted the Justice Jain committee in September 2018 to find ways and means to take appropriate steps against the erring officials who apparently framed Narayanan in a false espionage case. In 1996, the CBI took over the case from the Kerala police and filed a closure report. Vikas Sarthi, our legal correspondent, is joining us for more updates. Vikas, good afternoon. Help us understand what next for this case now that the Supreme Court has given its nod to the CBI taking further action on the report.
Right. So far as this issue is concerned, the Supreme Court has already held that Mr. Nambi Narayan was falsely implicated in this case, and in 2018, Supreme Court also directed the state government to give at least 50 lakhs as compensation to Mr. Nambi Narayan. After that, Mr. Nambi Narayan said that his fight is not yet over. He wants action against those people who were responsible for his persecution. They framed him in a false case. In fact, he said that it was alleged that he transferred some technology to some enemy nation. In fact, whatever has been mentioned in the police report, that technology was non-existent at that point in time. So he said that he was falsely implicated and he wants action against those people. On those prayers, Supreme Court had constituted Justice D.K. Jain committee. That committee gave its report, and it also pointed out that it seems that Mr. Nambi Narayan was falsely framed, and it was an act of commission and omission, and it needs to be further probed by the CBI. Now, the Centre was also of the opinion that Supreme Court should accept Justice Jain's report and pass appropriate orders. Supreme Court has today said that CBI should consider this report as preliminary inquiry and should proceed on the basis of this report. After 3 months, CBI is expected to file a status report before the Supreme Court, and apart from that, court has also mentioned very clearly that no part of this report should be leaked to media, and the copy of report will also not be given to any of the neither to the petitioner nor the respondents and those 3 police officials which are said to be behind this whole conspiracy. So now, after 3 months, CBI will file a status report before the Supreme Court.
Okay, Vikas Sarthi, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs on the Nambi Narayanan case. And in Midday Prime, it's time for news and updates from the world of business. right, let's start with news about stock markets. The domestic stock markets have been weak on Thursday, so the Sensex at the BSE had dropped 164 points or 0.5% to 48,380 a short while ago. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange had declined 39 points or 0.3% to 14,466. In the broader market, the BSE mid-cap index had shed 0.6% and the small-cap index had slipped 0.5%. The top index losers were Grasim, Asia Motors, Infosys and Maruti Suzuki with losses of between 3% and 4.3%. Stocks slipped amid the rising number of coronavirus cases and disappointing earnings from IT major Infosys. And the wholesale price-based inflation rose to 7.39% in March. All right, now I am joined by my colleague Tanvi, who will take us further with the news from the world of business. Tanvi, it's over to you.
Thank you, Shreya. Well, you've updated our viewers on the domestic stock market figure. They have been weak today, as you just mentioned. So wholesale price-based inflation figures have also come in. WPI-based inflation rose to an over 8-year high of 7.39% in March this year amid rising crude oil and metal prices. The low base of March last year contributed to the spike in inflation. Wholesale inflation has stood at 0.42% in March last year and 4.17% in February this year. According to data released by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, inflation in food articles stood at 3.24% in March this year as prices of pulses, fruits and paddy hardened. Inflation in pulses was 13.14% in March this year, and in fruits it was 16.33%. But vegetable prices actually declined 5.19% in March this year. Inflation in the fuel and power basket was 10.25% compared to 0.58% in February, mainly on account of rising petrol and diesel prices. Now shifting our attention to the forex market. The rupee appreciated 6 paise at 75 rupees against the US dollar. At the multi-commodity exchange, gold and silver prices climbed higher. The yellow metal was trading 212 rupees up at 46,820 rupees per 10 grams, while silver prices rose 246 rupees to 67,874 rupees per kilo. And if you talk of global crude oil prices now, they were steady on Thursday as they held around 1-month highs. Brent crude was up just 4 cents at $66.62 a barrel. US crude edged 3 cents lower to $63.12 a barrel. Oil had surged nearly 5% on Wednesday after the International Energy Agency and OPEC raised forecasts for oil demand as major economies recover from the pandemic. But we in India, we know we are braving the coronavirus's second wave, so we have to stay safe and, of course, stay invested. Back to you, Shreya.
Tanvi Taneja, thanks very much for joining us with all those updates from the world of business. And now let's have a look at what's making news across the globe. Well, President Joe Biden on Wednesday declared the plans to end the longest U.S. war, and it is, as he quoted, time for American troops to come home from Afghanistan as he looks to close out 2 decades of U.S. military involvement there, even as critics warn that peace is not assured. In a speech at White House, President Biden set a goal of withdrawing all 2,500 U.S. troops remaining in Afghanistan no later than 11th of September, with the final withdrawal beginning on the 1st of May. He added that he is the 4th president to preside over the U.S. troops in Afghanistan and that he will not pass responsibility on to a 5th president.
After consulting closely with our allies and partners, with our military leaders and intelligence personnel, with our diplomats and our development experts, with the Congress and the Vice President, as well as with Mr. Ghani and many others around the world, I've concluded that it's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home. The plan has long been in together, out together. U.S. troops, as well as forces deployed by our NATO allies and operational partners, will be out of Afghanistan before we mark the 20th anniversary of that heinous attack on September 11th. but will not take our eye off the terrorist threat. We'll reorganize our counterterrorism capabilities and the substantial assets in the region to prevent reemergence of terrorists with a threat to our homeland from over the horizon. We'll hold the Taliban accountable for its commitment not to allow any terrorist to threaten the United States or its allies from Afghan soil. The Afghan government has made that commitment to us as well.
Now remember, September 11th date, as we all know, coming 20 years to the day of the Al-Qaeda's attacks on the US that prompted the then President George W. Bush to launch the conflict. As many as 2,400 Americans lost their lives in that attack. Now, our President of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, on Wednesday tweeted that he had a telephonic conversation with President Joe Biden, during which both the leaders discussed the US decision to withdraw its force from early September. Ghani said the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan respects the US decision and will work with its US partners to ensure a smooth transition. Ghani added that Afghanistan will continue to work with its US NATO partners in the ongoing peace efforts. He also asserted that Afghanistan's security and defense forces are fully capable of defending its people and the country, which they have been doing all along and for which the Afghan nation will forever remain grateful. Well, meanwhile, Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab on Wednesday said the United Kingdom will support an orderly departure of forces from Afghanistan. He said, and I quote, "The UK stands with NATO and the people of Afghanistan to support a more stable, peaceful future for the country and the wider region. We will support an orderly departure of our forces whilst building up Afghanistan's capacity for self-governance and continuing counter-terrorism support to protect the gains made over the last 20 years, unquote. Now, hours after the United States announced that it will pull out from Afghanistan to end its longest war, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison today said that his country too will withdraw its remaining 80 military personnel from the country. Now, the withdrawal comes as the Afghan government and the Taliban have been holding talks to try and reach a political settlement to end decades of conflict.
Today, the government is announcing that Australia will conclude the drawdown of our contribution to the NATO-led Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan. Over the past 2 years, we've been reducing our military presence in Afghanistan from a high of over 1,500 personnel to around 80 personnel currently. In line with the United States and our other allies and partners, the last remaining Australian troops will depart Afghanistan in September 2021.
Moving on, a bipartisan resolution was introduced in the US House of Representatives yesterday condemning China's genocide of Uyghurs and other minorities while urging the US President Joe Biden to refer the crackdown to the United Nations. The resolution seeks multilateral sanctions against the Chinese government in the UN Security Council and other unspecified actions to bring the genocide to an end. Now, this comes a day after US Senators Marco Rubio and Chris Coons introduced bipartisan legislation wherein people of China's Uyghur minority community facing government repression would become eligible for prioritized US refugee status. And after that, it's time for updates from the world of sports. All right, my colleague Suchitra is joining us with all those exciting updates from the world of sports. Over to you, Suchitra.
Is side ahead. Early on in the first half, Riyad Mahrez then netted a penalty to make it 1-1, just as he did in the first leg. Phil Foden stepped up to make sure of the victory with a long-range strike. Pep Guardiola's side will play Mauricio Pochettino's PSG in the last 4 after they beat Bayern Munich. And Real Madrid set up a Champions League semi-final meeting with Chelsea by defeating Jurgen Klopp's side at bay in a goalless draw at Anfield. Real arrived at Anfield protecting a 3-1 lead from the first leg. Jurgen Klopp's men had endless opportunities to score, with Mo Salah missing an early chance. Liverpool gave it everything for the 90 minutes, but it was the lack of cutting edge that has characterized so many of their Anfield displays this season. Arsenal will be hoping to book a place in the UEFA Europa League semi-finals when they lock horns with Slavia Prague. The second leg of the Europa League quarter-finals will be played tonight. Trophy hopefuls Arsenal will travel to the Czech Republic as they gear up to take on Slavia Prague. The first leg did not go as per plans for Arsenal as they struggled to find the back of the net for large parts of the game. The contest ended in a 1-1 draw, with the Czech Giants coming away with a crucial away goal. Manchester United will look to seal a berth in the Europa League semi-finals as they host Grenada tonight with a 2-0 lead. Manchester United scored 2 away goals in the first leg of their quarter-final fixture against Grenada and are poised to progress to the Final Four. But it's only job half done, and without a few of their key players, United cannot take this match easily. Slavia Prague's Ondrej Kudela has been banned for 10 matches after racially abusing Glenn Kamara, with the Rangers midfielder suspended for 3 games. The Finn has been found guilty of assaulting Kudela in the tunnel after the side's stormy Europa League meeting at Ibro in March, which Slavia won. So those were some sports updates. Back to you, Shreya.
So Chitra, thanks very much for joining us with those updates. And now it's time for our next segment, which is Live Prime, where we get you news from across the globe, news that will make you smile, and of course, interesting stories from across the world. All right, before we end today's Midday Prime, we will leave you with the glimpses of Rio de Janeiro's Christ the Redeemer statue, which was bathed in the Olympics logo, and images of the sporting arenas to mark 100 days to the Tokyo Olympic Games opening ceremony. Take a look at those visuals, and of course, don't forget to wear a mask whenever you step out of your house, and of course, follow all guidelines. Thanks for joining us. Namaskar.